This is the database interaction activity in Java. I have the project open in Visual Studio Code along with the README file. Let's run through this really fast and then we'll get to the actual activity. This will take a little bit of time. There's quite a bit that we need to do, especially in the Java world. So our goal is to research and implement different ways to interact with the database in Java. In our case, I'm gonna leave the research to you. Go ahead and do that research, that internet research. There are two families of APIs for interacting with databases, whether it's Java or anything else. The first is a command query interface, and we'll do that first, and then we'll move on to an ORM, which is an Object Relational Mapping engine. There's a few of those out there. Spring has one built in. There's Hibernate. I'm going to use Hibernate for today, and then for the command query, I'm going to use JDBC. So definitely take some time to do some more research on your own. Take some notes if you haven't done that now. Dive into these concepts, see if you can figure out what some of those mechanisms, what some of those APIs are available in the Java world. Let's move on to Objective 2. I've got the folder open already. We can run the test. I can actually just run the test here from the test window as well, but you can certainly run it from the terminal command. Either way is fine. We'll also need to create the database locally. We'll do this by going to the app.java file, and then we can rerun that program or debug it to recreate it. And then we'll implement the two different ways. One will be for residential properties, the other will be for commercial properties. And so that's basically the structure of what we're going to do. So let me start off. I've got some warnings down here. Basically, we have a problem with the Java version. The program the code itself is designed for JRE 22, but I have 23 installed. So let me open up the POM.xml file. And these two values here, I just need to change to 23, save. When it asks, I definitely want to synchronize the class path in the configuration. We'll say yes, give that a moment, and we're Java ready. So at this point, I should be able to run my tests. I should get failures. And I do. The failures are happening because we're getting thrown exceptions, and that's by design, that's in the code. So we're good here. If you get to this error, you're in good shape. So let's go ahead and go back to the app.java. We're going to recreate that database here. So in main, under app.java, this is the code here. You may need to change your password, right? This is probably not your password for Postgres. The name should be Postgres if you installed it. The password will be whatever you set up when you first installed Postgres on your machine. So make sure to change this password to what you set it up as, not my silly password here. So I'm going to run this, and I can just click this little run link right up here at the top. We'll let this run. And if it's successful, we'll get a database real estate dropped and recreated successfully. If you don't see this, then you have a problem. You'll need to work through that. See if you can and try to work through the issue, or let me know and I'd be happy to help out. So we've now recreated the database. We are ready to start implementing code for these two different tests. So I'm going to start off with residential property. As I mentioned, I'm going to use JDBC to do that. The residential property class, I'll get rid of this. We are creating a residential property with an address. We are saying save that property, that we're getting all of the properties from the database. We're making sure there's exactly one, and we're making sure the values match. So save and get all aren't working. When I go to definition here, we can see why. We've got exceptions. We need to get rid of the exceptions. So the JDBC side of things is pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off, and I'll do the get all first because it's a little easier to do. So we'll do a try. So this is a auto closable, and this happens with the JDBC connections. So we'll say var connection equals driver manager. And do an import there, and we will get our connection. It's going to want the string URL, the username, and the password. Now, as I'm thinking through this driver manager connection, we're going to end up reusing this on at least a couple of methods. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up real quick, and I'm going to move this into a helper method. So we'll say private static connection. I will say create connection. Add our code here, and we'll need a string username and string password. Now this is starting to look an awful lot like our app.java. So I'm actually going to go to our app.java, and I'm going to copy these lines here because this is basically what we're looking for. It's close enough that I can copy it in. I need to get rid of the try, and I also need to get rid of the connection equals. We're just going to return that and then clean up some things on the end. This throws an exception. So we'll add our throws declaration, and we're good. So now inside my connection, I can say create connection, and that creates my connection to my database. Yeah, so we haven't created our result yet. So from here, what we're going to do is from the connection, we're going to create a statement. So we'll say try var statement equals connection dot create statement. Now that we have our statement, we're going to execute a query that's going to return a result set. You can see that in the IntelliSense. And again, I believe result set is disposable. So we'll say result set in a try equals statement dot execute query. This will be select star from, and this is the residential property table. Now that we have that, we can run through our result set, which is basically a result set.next. So while there's a next record, we're going to pull those values back out. So what do we need to do with these? We're going to basically add them to a list of residential properties and return that list of residential properties. So let's create that really fast. We're going to create it at the beginning of the method. Properties equals, this will be a new array list. And then at the end, we're going to return properties. So all we need to do in the middle of the while is simply pull the values out and then add them to our object. So we'll say var street address equals result set dot get string, because it's a string value. And the label will be the name of the column in the database, so street address. So var street address, we'll do the same thing for city. State abbreviation. And then postal code. Now that we have our values, we are ready to add our properties. So we'll say properties.add, and we're doing a new residential property. And we're going to simply pass those values into the constructor and add that on. That looks about right. So this is the code for JDBC that uses a command query. This in this particular case is a query. On the save, we're going to use a command. So it's going to be very similar, but there's going to be a few differences. We're not going to do a result set. Instead, we're going to execute that out. So that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and copy this out, and we're going to paste it down below in the save. There's a lot of this code that is a bit boilerplate. We're going to get rid of our inner try here. So on the statement, instead of a create statement, because we're going to be inserting, we need to prepare a statement so we can add parameters. So we'll do a prepare statement. This wants to know the SQL that we're going to execute here. So this will be insert into, this will be residential address, residential property. And now it's going to want the column names that we're going to use. So this will be ID, street address, city, state abbreviation, and postal code. Now that we have those, we need to bind some values. So our values, I'm going to do a random UUID. So this is an ID property. We can see that here, right here. So our ID here is not null. It's char38. So it's intended to be a UUID or a GUID. So I'm going to use the gen random UUID built-in function for Postgres so that we will generate that random UUID. And then the other values, street address, city, state abbreviation, postal code, are just simply parameters that we're going to add in. So there's our prepared statement. We'll notice when I hover over var here, well, it's not helping me out. This is a prepared statement, which is a different class from our create statement, which is just a statement. So those are two different classes that we're going to be using. So our statement here, what we can do now is we can basically add our parameters. So now that we've created the statement, we need to add the parameters to it. So we'll say set string. This is a string parameter. These are one base rather than zero base. So Java's going to throw a little monkey wrench into things. So the first question mark is going to be this dot street address. And this will be in the order that I specified it. So the order of these question marks are going to be the order of the column names that we specified. Again, the value for ID is already specified, so we need street address, city, state abbreviation, then postal code. So there's the first one, and then statement set string. Number 2 is going to be this dot city, statement set string. 3 is going to be this dot state abbreviation. And then finally, statement set string. 4 is going to be, I can type, this dot postal code. So there's our parameters. Now that we've done that, we can execute our statement. So we will simply call statement.execute. All right, so at this point, we should be able to run the test and get a success. So let's try that. See if we did anything wrong. Okay, so I do have a problem. Let's see if we can find out the problem. Okay, so this is a casing problem, and I think I set this up on the app.java. Hopefully I fixed that by the time you get the code, but if not, in the app.java, all of these values need to be lowercase. So commercial property both need to be lowercase. The column name, the street address, everything needs to be lowercase. So I'm going to select it all, make it all lowercase. I don't have that shortcut ready. So we'll just go through and we need to set all of these to lowercase. So this is a Postgres thing by default. If you don't escape the column names and the table names, it wants everything to be lowercase. So we're going to conform to that. Every database engine has its own idiosyncrasies that you have to understand, navigate, and deal with. All right, now that we've got that, we're going to rerun this so that we recreate the database. There it is. Let's rerun our test. All right, still have a problem. Oh, did I type something wrong? Residential property. Let me just copy this and make sure I typed it correctly. Residential property does not exist. All right, so this is going to be fun. We're going to need to see if we can figure out why this is failing. So what it's basically saying, residential property does not exist. The relation is a table. So it's basically saying that the table does not exist. Now let's go back to our app.java. So create table, residential property. Make sure this is all saved. That all looks correct. Let me try rerunning. Database exists, real estate. That looks correct. Just try rerunning this again. All right, dropped and recreated successfully. Rerun our test. Still getting an error. Well, this is fascinating. Let me make sure that the services are running correctly. So here's Postgres. Let me restart Postgres. Rerun app.java. Rerun our test. Still get the failure. This is fascinating. All right, I have a working version. I'm going to see if I can copy from that. Maybe I have made a typo in here somewhere. Go back to property. Rerun, recreate our database. There it is. Rerun our test. Still failing. All right, so now we're going to go to pgadmin. We're going to see if we can connect directly to the database and see if we can find out what's happening with the database itself. Pgadmin a moment to start. There it goes. Alrighty, so we are going to open our servers, put my super secret password in, look at the databases. So here's real estate. We're going to navigate in. We're going to find the schemas, which we just want the public schema. And then under here, we're going to look for tables. All right, there's residential property. Shouldn't need the public dot, but I'm going to try putting public dot in front of it. Never had to do that before, but let's just try it. Nope, still can't find it. Do I have a problem with my connection? I do. Oh my goodness. Silly Chad. All right, so what I've got here is I'm connecting to the database that doesn't have a database name. So this is connecting to the root. That's my problem. So let me go back to app.java. What I need to do, I pulled the wrong connection string. I need the one that connects to the real estate database. So in the URL, I need to add real estate for that database on this server. Oh goodness, I feel silly. All right, let's run the test again. There we go, now we have a pass. So it is adding our record, it is selecting everything back out. I didn't need the public, so that's good. So everything was working, everything was fine. The casing was important, but what the real problem was is I was connecting to the root database or the master database rather than the specific real estate database, which is where I needed to connect. All right, so now that we've gotten past that, I'm gonna close pgadmin 4. We don't need this open anymore. And I'll close my services. All right, so that takes us through the residential property. Let's move on to the commercial property. So for commercial property, I mentioned I'm going to use Hibernate. There's several different ORMs out there for the Java world. You're welcome to use any of them. You'll need to basically do quite a few internet searches or use AI to try to help you piece this together. There's a lot of different pieces that you need to configure. Again, I've gotten this working already in another project, so I'm going to pull from that. So the first thing we're going to need to do for Hibernate is we're going to need to add the dependency in our pom.xml file. So the dependency, I'm going to copy and paste here from my other project. The version number will be specific to whichever version number you want. This is not the latest version. This is one of the later versions, but it's not the latest version. So you may want a later version, you may need an earlier version. But we're going to need this dependency on Hibernate in order to be able to pull the types in. So I'll save this. Yes, synchronize the class path. So that's step one. Then from there, I've got a few different things I can do. So let's talk through what we need to do. So we're going to need to implement in commercial property the code that's going to connect to the session, to the configuration, and execute the Hibernate query. We're also going to need to create the objects that map to the tables. So that'll be another step. And we're going to need to create a configuration file for Hibernate. So 3 different things that we're going to need to do. There's not really a right and wrong to this. I'm going to start from, because I'm a top-down guy, I'm going to start from the actual code that we want to write. We'll use this code to kind of drive through what we're trying to do, and then we'll just drive down. So I'll go through the code, then I'll create the class, and then finally I'll do the configuration file. Then we'll get everything set up, and hopefully we'll be able to test this from there. So starting off here, what we're going to need to do is very similar. We're going to create a list of commercial properties, and we're going to return those at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up just so we can get that part out of the way. So do array list. This is very similar to what we did with the residential properties. So there's our properties. Now in the middle here, just like we did on the residential property, this is going to be our connection and population of that list. How we connect is going to be very different. So we're going to start off with the configuration class. And this is the org.hibernate.cfg configuration class. So I'll pull that in. So be a new configuration object. And then we'll say configuration.configure. This method is going to pull from the configuration file that we will create shortly. We have not created this yet. Now that I've got that, I'm going to create a session factory. This is from org.hibernate. This will be from configuration.build session factory. So there's my session factory. Now that I've got that, I'm going to create a session. So a few steps here. So open session. And then from here, I'm going to need a using or an import. So org.hibernate, let's add that one in. Now we can create our query. So there's going to be a query and we're going to need to query for this specific data object. It's not a commercial property. I need to create some class that maps to the table. I'm going to call it commercial property record, just to keep it separate from this class. So it's different, it's distinct. It's going to look very similar in terms of the fields and the methods, but it is a distinct class. The record class is designed to map to the table. This commercial property class is designed to represent the logic of commercial properties. So this is kind of the downside of ORMs, is you have to figure out how to map these things, and they can get a little crazy. So this will be a query. This will be from session.query. And it wants to know the query. And so this is going to be interesting. This is, you're going to think this is SQL, but this is not SQL. We're going to say from, and we're going to pull from this class, so from commercial property record. So it's going to then map to the table itself, which is commercial property lowercase. But here we're pulling from the actual class. So the Hibernate query is from that. Now, in addition, I want to tell it the type of object. So this is going to be commercial property record dot class, which doesn't exist yet. So this is going to error out. We're going to get to that here in a moment. So there's my query. Now that I have my query, we're going to get the results. So we'll say query dot, I need an equal sign. There we go. Query dot get result list stream, and then we'll for each over this. So for each record, let's do some work. So for each record, what we're going to do is we're going to create a commercial property. And from the record, we're going to get the street address, record get city, record get state abbreviation, and record get postal code. We're going to pull those values from the record class and populate them into the commercial property class, this class. Then we'll simply say add commercial property. IntelliSense is angry because of the red here. That's okay, we'll get to that in a moment. So this is basically the structure of it. I can also do the save, but before I do the save, let's at least get this part working. So we're going to need, the next step is we're going to need to create this class. So the class is, you can put this really anywhere you want. I'm going to create a new folder called data. And in the data folder, I'll create a new file, commercial property record.java. So here's my class. Now that I have that, this class, I'm going to need to import this. And that gets rid of a lot of this. Now it's complaining because these methods don't exist. Well, this class is going to look very similar to my other class. So I'm going to copy and paste what we've got here into this class. Let's do record, and we'll get rid of those. And then from here, the other thing we're going to need to do is map to the ID column. So most of these are going to map directly to the column name. So I'm going to actually change these so that they match closer to the column name. I'm going to get rid of the underscores. That way these look like the column names. Now I'm going to need the ID as well. And so to do that, so first off, we'll do a private. We don't necessarily want these to be final because this is a data record. This will be a UUID ID, and this needs to have an ID property from Jakarta.persistence. So we'll pull that in. This says this is the ID column for the table mapping. With that, I want to make sure that I set that equal to an ID. So we'll say UUID, random UUID, so that we always make sure that the ID is a new random value. This is going to be needed later on. A couple of more attributes that we're going to need to add. The first is the entity attribute from Jakarta.persistence, and then we need the table attribute also from Jakarta.persistence. We'll say name equals commercial property. This right here is how the class in Hibernate maps to the actual underlying table in the database. So there's our commercial property. That looks good. Let's get back to our commercial property class. This looks good, no errors. So a couple more things that we need to do. I still need to create the configuration file, but I also need to do save. I'm going to go ahead and do save since I'm in this class, and then we'll come back and do the configuration file last. So now that I have this, we are going to need to do some of the same things. So I'm going to copy and paste our session configuration and session. Now that we've got that, we're not going to be doing a query, and instead we're going to create a transaction. We're creating a transaction because we're doing some sort of insert, update, delete. We're changing the data. So we're going to pull our transaction in. Now that we've got that, we're going to need to create one of these commercial property records. And then we're going to need to set these values. So here I've got the getters. I need to add setters. Copy and paste these down. We will change these, state abbreviation, and finally street address. All right, so now I have setters. Now I can go back in here and say record.set street address from this .street address. And the same thing on the other properties. We'll set city. We'll set state abbreviation. And finally, set postal code. Now that we've got those, we need to persist it. So we'll say session.persist our record, and then finally transaction.commit. So this is the structure that we want to use for inserting a record into the database. Now that we've got all this ready to go, I can run this, but it's going to fail. And the reason it's going to fail is, and I'll go ahead and run this so you can see, is we don't have the configuration file. So if I look at the error that says, hey, I could not locate the cfg.xml file. What it wants is a file in a resources folder called hibernate.cfg.xml. So under main, think through this, under main is where we're going to need that. So I'm going to right click on main, I'll say new folder, and this will be a resources file or folder underneath the main folder. So Java, com, all of that's got our code. Resources is going to have our configuration file. So I'll create hibernate.cfg .xml. Now you can pull from the internet some example files here. You can pull from AI. I'm going to copy and paste from what I've already got, and we're going to talk through some of the things here. So when you pull this in, make sure your driver is correct. For example, the first example I pulled in pointed to MySQL, so I had to change this driver class to be the specific driver class. Your URL, username, and password also need to be correct, so make sure that those are changed to the values that we have back in the app.java or inside the JDBC driver. Most of the rest of this is fine, but then your mapping class, make sure that you have your commercial property record class. So this is going to be the package name is the first part, so let's make sure that's correct. So I'll just copy and paste. I think it was the same, but just to make sure. And then the class name, copy and paste on the last part. So those are the things that you'll need to make sure are set to go. You'll notice this says a MySQL dialect. I'm going to leave that alone for now. You could change that to a Postgres dialect, but the MySQL should work just fine for what we're trying to do. So make sure to change those. If you have a problem with this, you will get an error, a runtime error when you run your test. Now that I have everything running, let's see if this works. This certainly didn't work the first several times I ran it, but let's see what we've got here. All right, so we have an error. All right, so it's still not finding the CFG XML. Let me make sure I put that in the correct place. So resources under main, oh, it would help if I could spell, not Hibernate, Hibernate. Let's try that again. There we go, we get a pass. Whew. All right, so I'm gonna run both the tests again, and actually we're gonna find out that we have a problem. So it's failing on the second run. The reason it's failing is it's saying, hey, I found 2 records, but you were suggesting 1. So what's happening is we're not dropping and recreating the database every time. We're not clearing the database. So there's a few different ways to handle this. I'm going to do this very simply by creating a method that's going to help us out. So we'll create a method that we call at the beginning of each test that says, we're going to indent. It's going to say reset data. So copy this. Paste it down, and now we're going to need to create a method here. So this is going to be our test methods, and I'll have a new section for regular methods. Private static void reset data. We're in Java, Chad. Function names are lower first level, first character. So with our reset data, what we're going to do is effectively connect to the database, and then once we connect to the database, we're going to truncate the table. So I'm going to go back to my residential property class, and we will pull from here. We'll say connection equals driver manager connection. Password is password. We need to import throws declaration for sure. Okay, there we go. And then from here, we're going to need to do a statement. So we'll say statement equals connection dot create statement. And now statement execute. Regular execute, there we go. And then we will do a truncate. So truncate table, commercial property. We'll do the same thing on residential property. So effectively what's going to happen is when at the beginning of each test, we're going to truncate any data that's there. We're going to delete all of it. So let's rerun the test now. And they pass. So we are in good shape. One more thing I do want to point out, you'll notice that the Hibernate test took almost 2 seconds on my computer, and the regular JDBC driver took only 89 milliseconds, so substantially faster. There are performance overhead with ORM tools like Hibernate, like Spring, like Entity Framework, like these kinds of tools there. So there is performance overhead, so be mindful of that. However, sometimes that performance overhead can be good enough and can help us with compile time checking and some other benefits as well. But that basically concludes it. So we've kind of gone through everything just to review, because that was a lot. What we've got here, so let's look at the residential property class first. So residential property class, we used JDBC. This is a command query interface. We're going to create a connection each time. We will create a statement for doing a select. We simply do our select, and then we're going to iterate over the results to get those values back and add them to our list. On the insert, we're going to prepare a statement because we have parameters. So we're going to prepare an insert statement here. And then we're going to bind our parameters and execute that out. So that's the first one. On the commercial property, quite a bit more going on. So we're going to open a connection to the Hibernate configuration through a session. So we'll do our configuration, we'll build our session factory, we'll open a session, we'll build our query from the record type, and then project that out into our commercial properties. On the reverse side of it, when we're inserting, we're still opening a session. We're now going to open a transaction, create our record, persist it, and commit the transaction. That requires a commercial property record class. This is a class that maps directly to the table. We need to specify that it's an entity. We need to tell it the table and the table name, and we need to tell it what the ID is and make sure that value's there. We'll need getters and setters as a part of that. Finally, at the end, we need our Hibernate configuration file. There's a lot going on with Hibernate. So these settings need to be configured, make sure everything looks good, compare them to your file if you're having any problems. But that concludes the database interaction in Java. That was a lot, so I hope it was helpful.